now going to call to order this public hearing tonight to discuss the tentative 2018 budget, tentative preliminary, however you want to characterize it. So welcome. I'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Councilwoman Barnum.
Here.
Councilwoman Hush-LeRae.
Here.
Councilman Perdico.
Here.
Councilman Weiner. Supervisor Seeley.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. This is our annual budget hearing tonight. Order of business, I'll give a brief PowerPoint presentation, and then as customary, we will open it up for citizen testimony. And the budget has in its first iteration was posted, I believe, 3 weeks ago. Since then, the board has accepted the updated version, and it leads us to tonight. Just a little bit of a note, before I get in, we'll go down and give a presentation. I just want to thank, as always, our staff, and particularly our comptroller staff, Comptroller Seeley, Diana Marsh, Rick Checky, Tony D'Ambra, for the work they do. This is a lot of preparation, and a $34 million budget has a lot of appropriations and revenue lines, and the process works very good, and I'm always very happy with the process. And the same goes to the department heads and their staff. They do an outstanding job just preparing both their tentative budgets for me to look at, and then whatever we give to the board is the result of a lot of hard work. So with that, I will make a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing is now open. I will now invite board members to sit in the front row, and I will give a brief presentation on the proposed budget. Yes. That's good, Don. Thanks. Okay, so a few general items. Total spending in this year's budget is $34 million. I will note, in 2010, the town budget was $32 million. So really over the past almost a decade now has been a really strong sense of fiscal constraint, discipline that first was brought on by the recession and the need to really rein in spending given declining revenue. But as revenue has increased, spending has not really gone out of control, and as a result, as you'll see, the tax rate has been able to stay level. Revenues, $12.2 million, slightly less than a third of total spending. Special assessments are almost $5 million. We are taking a very small amount from our fund balance, and I'll note later that it's relative to previous years a small amount, and certainly not a whole lot of our entire fund balance. And that results, the balance of that is the net expense to the tax levy. That's our tax levy. It's $16.708 million, which if you look is only a fifth of a percentage point over the previous year, so really almost a nominal increase in the tax levy. And of course our goal is always flat tax levy or even reduced tax levy, but we're very happy with the result there. So a few highlights. As I said, the tax rate remains level. It's been level for about 7 or 8 years now, and I joked at Comptroller Seeley. 6.51 is a number that will be embedded and synonymous with Comptroller Annie Seeley forever, because it has remained at 6.51 through the duration of her tenure as our Comptroller. Overall spending increases at 0.8%, which is well below the rate of inflation, and I'll get to what we were able to accomplish and some of the challenges we had just to get that overall spending at that amount. We're far under the state mandated property tax cap. We actually had a lot of room this year with the property tax cap. The base cap, which is 2%, was closer to 2% this year, but given the fact we've stayed under the cap for the past few years, we were actually given more room to grow. So we actually could have increased the levy a great amount and actually stayed beneath the property tax cap, but as you'll see, far below that cap. And continue to reduce reliance on the fund balance relative to previous years. A few years ago we drew down a lot of our fund balance, and I think we really want to steady that. So the goal is to really keep it at a lower relative amount to the overall fund balance in itself. Some principles of the 2018 budget. Happy to say we have some additional dollars for programming at the library. We built the library. We're happy to finance the library, and it's great to see everything going on there. And the library developed their long-range plan. They put a lot of work into that, and we were able to, I think, implement some elements of that plan. And part of that is investing in programming and training for staff. So I think we've made a good down payment on not only having that brick and mortar over there, but really enhancing what we offer to our residents. We'll continue our largely popular neighborhood enhancement program. I think we're budgeting $25,000, and those, I say, are the small value but high impact projects we do throughout our neighborhoods, and they're funded through a grant program we're working through right now, actually. On the revenue side, we anticipate significant economic development in 2018, and we never really are, a lot of times the revenue we take in is symbolic of the amount of economic activity going on in town, whether it's building permits in general. But the more you see our building department taking in and projected to take in, that's based on projections of how much economic activity we're going to have. So you're seeing that with the redevelopment of the mall. You're seeing it with other large projects we expect to come online next year. So while it's revenue, and it's a modest assessment based on that economic activity, it's a positive thing and a good indicator that economic activity is on the uptick. And we have continued investment for our police department, including purchasing additional vehicles, and we're able to update some IT needs through either staffing or other investments we made to implement body-worn cameras. So some of the challenges, what we were facing up against, a future slide will show we've had some growth in our tax base. The tax base continued to grow, however, we had some downward pressure on it through some settlements, through some challenges to assessments. We settled a lot last year. It involved some significant reductions to the overall assessable value. So we saw, not steady but nominal growth in the tax base. The past few years, it was relatively flat this year, so that gives us less kind of a buffer to grow almost. Health insurance costs increased approximately 11%. Last year was closer to 7%, I believe, and we're continuing to do things to really study our health insurance, which includes continuing to encourage our great employees to go on the the more economical plan, which still is a very good health plan, but over the past several years we've really made the transition to the more feasible plan for our employees. But you're still seeing a much higher health increase, and we also saw a lot of retirements. And what happens with our retirements is you replace it with an employee who has the health insurance, but the retiree goes off, they're entitled to health insurance, so it increases our health insurance costs. It's a long-term concern of the town, and one we're always mindful of as we bargain our contracts, but that created some challenges to overcome. Overall, our health care increases totaled $409,000. We also had workers' compensation costs that rose over last year's budgeted amount, I think somewhere around $60,000 as well. And despite that, town spending only increased $267,000. So despite the fact having the starting point being near $500,000, we actually only increased spending by $276,000 and change. And we were able to find some efficiencies within our budget while maintaining and actually increasing services. So kudos to the staff on the work on that. Activities by function, as you can see, almost 2/3 of everything we do is either police or public works. So those are the vital essential services. We call them, not the welfare services, but maintaining the well-being both of our infrastructure as well as our populace. So, town government is really synonymous with delivering those vital services that people see in their everyday lives. So that's no secret. Categories of expense. This doesn't change a lot year to year. I will note, though, the the debt service, last year that number was 10.5%. So we're actually seeing some retirement of our debt service, which is a good thing. I think gradually we've been disciplined in accruing new long-term debt over the past decade. We're starting to get more into the bonding, but still relative to where we were 10, 15 years ago, we're doing less borrowing, so that's allowing us to retire some of that debt service. So debt service makes up a significantly less chunk of our overall budget than it did in the past several years. Sources of revenue, as you can see, about 50% is derived from property taxes. This really doesn't change too much over the years. It's really generally around half. We try to keep it there. Now, residents are right to ask, where do their tax dollars, property tax dollars go? And as you can see, again, it's really, the majority of it is towards those vital services, police, public works. So nothing really stands out there. Those numbers are relatively level over the years. So some efficiencies, some ways I think, and these are small anecdotal perhaps, but I think they're examples of ways we were able to keep that spending down, and really the spending we can control, really keeping almost a net negative. So we've had some human capital efficiencies. Last year we transitioned to one-person plowing with our highway department. That's allowed us to reduce overtime significantly. With the fire, we're tasked with really replenishing our fleet, and one of the ways we did that is through purchasing used vehicles, which I think is prudent. It helps us with our replacement schedule. And also, I think it's just what residents want us to do. I don't think residents wanted us to go out to the new car lot and buy all new vehicles. Reduced energy costs. Again, we've made investments in our energy system, our new boiler. We're going to be installing solar panels in some of our physical plant, and the energy costs reflected in this budget, the assumptions we make are lower energy uses based on those investments we make. And we refinanced some of our debt earlier this year. We're managing our debt better, but if we can find ways to refinance and seize opportunities, our overall debt service decreased even further. I noted earlier that the assessed value really was relatively flat this year. As you can see, it increased by about $2.7 million, but of overall assessed value of $2.568 billion, that's basically a nominal increase. Whereas you saw modest, again, if you look at those previous 3 years combined, you have about $55 million, $56 million in increased assessed value. That gives you a little bit of room to grow with your property tax without increasing the rate. So it was a challenge we were up against this year, and I'm glad that we were able to overcome it. And lastly, I'll just note, I noted that we relied on fund balance. The goal is always to have 0%, but I'm happy that overall reliance on fund balance is I think, acceptable. It's less than has been the norm for the past several years. If you look at the general fund, our general fund balance as of January 2018 will be $4.2 million, and that's with the assumption of this draw from the fund balance. Total in the general fund is $20.3 million. That makes our fund balance approximately 20.7% of that fund. We have a town policy that was instituted several years ago that says the fund balance should be between 5 and 20%. So we're still north of that acceptable amount. So one might argue we should draw that down a little bit more. I don't think I accept that argument, but nevertheless, we're still with our general fund, which is, as you can see, our largest fund balance above our policy, what our policy allows as a maximum or suggests as a maximum. And you can see some of the other funds are robust relative to the size of the fund overall. The consolidated sewer fund, we reinvest that money, so I think you'll see consolidated sewer fund annually. We use that fund balance to make purchases of vehicles, cash capital, if you will. So that's reinvesting it, not keeping that. But overall, I think, and this is a lot to do with Annie and my predecessors managing that fund balance good. It's an acceptable value. I look at other towns, and I'm somewhat envious because they're really able to reserve. But one might argue the reserve should be at a level that doesn't suggest you're just embargoing the money. If you're holding it to spend it, that's good if you have it dedicated. But, our fund balance is there. We hope to reinvest it at some point through some capital need, but very happy where it is overall. As always, residents are free to either call or come in or email with questions. We receive questions all the time about our budget. A lot of just questions about particular items. And the feedback is always very positive. We appreciate it. We love it. I always love having our board members. We sit through the workshops 2 days in a row for several hours each day, and it allows the board members really to roll up their sleeves and familiarize themselves with each particular line item of the budget. And I'm going to miss Councilwoman Barnum dearly, because she really is the most diligent about very good questions. She never has a frivolous question either. Her questions always have tough answers to them, so I will miss Lori's, and I hope she just attends next year the workshop. She's more than welcome to. I might CC her as an interested stakeholder, but just again, thank you to the board members. Happy with this budget. I always say, I have a pet peeve when people say we kept taxes flat while maintaining vital services. I think we're always looking to increase what we do in delivering back services for tax dollars. So happy overall. So with that, we will convene back up to the dais. We will turn the podium around, and we will welcome public input for this hearing. Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Sinton. We have one person signed up to speak, but certainly anyone else in the audience is welcome to volunteer their voice afterwards. The person signed up is Jeff Goldblatt, 128 Parkside Crescent. Mr. Goldblatt, the floor is yours. Good evening, sir.
Would have been nice if we had had this a couple of weeks ago and not on a night like this. Just a point of personal privilege. Good evening, Jeff Goldblatt, 128 Parkside Crescent. Sadly, this is my 26th budget presentation. A few more efficiencies to add to your list this evening. As in the past, and for purposes of clarity, I may mention certain companies by name. I do not have any employment or financial relationship with any such firm. Let me begin with Parks and Rec. One efficiency that could be done is to follow the lead of the town of Penfield, and that would be to bid out turf mowing on all town properties as far as grass cutting is concerned. Now, they have quite a bit. Their bid indicates 17 sites and 33 acres of grass that has to be cut. We don't have quite that much. And this, again, as I've said in the past, is not this is a budget hearing, not how good or bad of a job someone is doing hearing. This is strictly money. And doing something like this would enable you to reduce your fuel, labor, and equipment cost and insurance cost, both health insurance and otherwise, with that savings built in. Seems to work for the town of Penfield, and it might be worth a try for us. The 4th of July, and this is a recycling issue. It has been a recycling issue from the beginning, except for 1 year, and that was last year when nickels were held out and given to the Boy Scouts. This is a terribly inefficient system that may have been fine in the 1960s, but it's not now. The costs include having to store, unstore, and move around barrels. I knew the pictures were going to get out of order, including the ones with the peeling paint, which I don't think make a very good presentation. Then you have the cost to rent out roll carts from your current hauler. The last figure I heard is about $40 a piece. Then you have the high lift by the highway building here, which is an unnecessary cost because people still don't get the idea that a a roll-off box, the back door opens, so you do not have to lift things up and over. That eliminates an interdepartmental charge for the high lift and the high lift operator. And you also are renting a 40-yard box with recycling. That should clearly be able to be cut in half with a tarp to keep out any rain and any illegal dumping after hours. How to fix the problem. This is a brochure, and I'll be happy to share a copy with your administrator, how to recycle at your event. This container is shown here is from a company called Clearstream. They have clear bags for recycling. They have black bags for trash. Much easier to store, and once you buy the racks, that's it. All you're buying after that is bags. so you're not schlepping barrels all over the town property. And if you wish, company right here in town, Ridge and Nickelback, they have a fundraising trailer. Maybe we can engage with them to capture all the cans and bottles that are generated on the 4th of July days, and the money can go to wherever you want, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, whatever non-for-profit group you wish. At Joshua Park, while it was nice to see, and I'm sure the kids appreciate, the new playground that was installed this year, there are still 3 items that need to be addressed. Number one, the former gravel pit area right now is nothing but an overgrown mountain of leaves and other waste that has to be removed. It has to be returfed as soon as the last drop of snow melts in the spring. I don't think that the family involved would be appreciative of how this particular area looks. The town seal needs to be replaced at the Seville entrance, which has been bleached out by the sun, and there's also a CCTV sign that needs to be lowered. Again, these are not big budgetary items, but things that have been hanging out there for the last couple of years. Plus, you need to have, at this and other parks, containers to capture cans and bottles. The county is under a 60% commitment that was made to Monroe County. Monroe County currently is at 38%. So everyone, whether you're a homeowner, a business owner, or the town, needs to step up its game. I can accurately report to you that the county executive is aware of this, that she inherited this from the prior administration. We have spoken about this, and I have sent her memoranda with ideas. In fact, right before the recycling presentation I made here earlier in the summer. So any way we can to help get the number to creep closer to 60%, the better. Code enforcement. We're going to camp out here for a couple of minutes because there are issues, serious issues. And issues that should have been resolved a decade, 2 decades ago are still hanging out there. Dumpster enclosures. This was established by the town in the early 90s. This is version 5. Let me repeat that. Version 5 of the missing in action list that I compiled. Not code enforcement, me, in the middle of summer. And it does generate not only building permit revenue and sales tax revenue as well. If I'm a property owner in town and I've done my thing to make sure I'm compliant with the code and other businesses that I see aren't, I'm going to be a little bit annoyed. It's just a simple matter of fairness, not to mention money. Then we have house numbers. This is a clipping from the old Irondequoit Town Hall report, and it says, this is a mandatory rule passed in 1991. There are still plenty of homes in this town. You can't read their numbers either from the public sidewalk or from the street. That is a lawsuit waiting to happen if, God forbid, emergency services can't find somebody's house, especially on a night like this with inclement weather. You really don't want to have to be sitting in your homes and turn on a newscast and say, tonight in Irondequoit, there's a tragedy to report. You don't want that to happen. It is a public safety issue that should have been resolved back in the 90s. And there's still plenty. Set a date. Any date you want. And after that date, if your house is not in compliance and you can't see the numbers from the street and the sidewalk, you're going to be fined. Make up a number of fine, whatever number you wish. But it's a public safety issue, and it does put this town at legal risk. There's also then the issue of illegal dumping that isn't being addressed by code enforcement. Twice, no, I take that back, 3 times this year, I had to get involved in something like this, and twice I was told upstairs, well, sir, you have to go talk to the police. I can remember a time in this building when I didn't have to go bother an Irondequoit police officer on illegal dumping problems. As a matter of fact, and I don't say this to pat myself on the back, if we were in Japan, I know I would be referred to as a worthless gaijin. I get it. But in the case of Stepping Stones, which was getting out of control once they closed, it got to the point where I simply had to intervene with the hauler in question, made them understand that there's nobody there anymore, and you need to lift your containers. Happy to do my civic duty, but that's something that my tax dollars are supposed to be paying for, which is code enforcement, keeping up on these things. And oh, by the way, just walking over here this evening, TVs, computer monitors at the curb. They're not supposed to be there. That is New York state law, not Jeff law, not county law. And again, nobody's policing this. So something needs to be done. And one thing that was done by this town when there's a problem back, this comes from the old, when we had a real town newspaper. August 28th of 2003, crossing guards hired to spot code violations. Maybe we need to do this again. We've got to do something because all these little things are eating away at the fabric of this community. And obviously we want to have a nice community, but there are problems, and when there are problems, they need to be addressed before they fester and get worse. Those are the problems with code enforcement. The cemetery is a sideline enterprise that is still not necessary for day-to-day life in this town. Currently, this is costing at least $250,000, with revenue making up at least half. It's time to initiate talks with a company called Stonemore, which is publicly held, about a takeover of the facility. And there's any number of ways, and you read their annual report. I am not a shareholder. They cater to nonprofit entities, including a number of church parishes around the country that have run into financial problems. If they say, well, your town isn't enough for us to come in, we could partner with the city. I know the city will demur on Mount Hope for a variety of reasons, but Riverside is not a historic facility. Riverside has got problems with maintenance that has been documented by television news twice this year, including Boy Scouts last weekend digging out headstones in advance of Veterans Day. So maybe both would be a little bit more attractive to this firm. We get a big cost off the books, and so does the city because they have their issues as well. Building maintenance. Between this building, public safety, and I think one or two others, I think the number is now about $500,000 to keep these buildings cleaned and maintained. Again, this is something that could be bid out. I know Regional Transit has done that with their headquarters. Others have too, and there's quite a number of firms out there who I would suspect would be willing to take care of our buildings and keep them in tip-top shape. Again, this is a money issue, not a how good or bad somebody is doing their job issue. We've talked about firms in the past, such as Midnight Janitorial, that has quite a stellar reputation as a woman-owned business. They've won awards. There's any number of others. They can be held to a high standard, just like everyone else, including grass cutting, where the firm has to put up a performance bond, proof of insurance, and so forth. But it's worth it to bid it out and see. Through an RFQ, not an RFP, is there a savings by turning this work out? Solid waste. By my count, there's about 17 companies missing in action who are not licensed into the town of Arundecoit. And these are all these smaller roll-off firms that work with home improvement companies doing roofing projects. One or two work with a couple of the estate sale firms, and that can start to add up to some serious dollars. If I own a company, let's call it Jeff's Junk, just to keep that alliteration thing going, and I've licensed in, I got stickers on my truck, I got all the things that you're supposed to do done, and I see a competitor who's not licensed in, I'm going to be a little bit upset. Hey, I'm playing by the rules. Why isn't my competitor playing by the rules? This is an old story that got opened up years ago, and I really don't know how, but we're either going to license in everybody or we're going to do away with the whole thing. In fact, one of the companies on this list, whose name I always chuckle over, I was going by their truck the other day, rolling in on my bike into the slum known as Arundecoit Plaza, and there on the front bumper, rolled right up to the truck, there's a sticker from the town of Greece. They manage this, we don't. As I said, it's an either-or proposition. Either everyone gets licensed in, or we do away with the whole thing. In fact, I was even told at one point, well, we send the notices out, but not everyone responds. Maybe we try reaching out to the home improvement companies, the roofing companies, and so forth, and say, whoever you want to hire is fine, just please make sure they're licensed into the town of Arundecoit. Maybe that will help start cleaning some of this up. I also noticed that tipping fees are now zero in the book. That used to generate a few $1,000s, and I'll come back because that brings me to leaves at the end. And there might be a way to regenerate that as your planning begins for the new Public Works facility. We've also talked about in the past of outfitting one of our trucks like so. This is equipment from a company called Lodell to take care of concrete pickups and brick pickups that people, when they're doing their own home improvement work, put at the curb instead of running multiple vehicles. This can be done with one truck instead of multiple vehicles, so you have fuel, insurance, and labor savings on that work. And there should be a little bit of a fee. That shouldn't be something that all of us as taxpayers subsidize, just as a matter of fairness, and it brings in a few more dollars. As a matter of fact, in Section 192 of the code, it specifies a standard area of 5 by 5 by 3. Okay, you have 5 by 5 by 3, you're going to pay X. If you're doing a major excavation on your property, you're going to pay a little bit more than X. Public Works should have the figures of what is being collected on an annualized basis, and you can work from there. Also, when it comes to morbidities, a company called Perkins has come up with a new truck to deal with those who, of our animal friends who don't make it back to where they wanted to go. And this makes that unpleasant chore a little bit more tolerable. And there may be grants that can take care of this through Fish and Wildlife or someplace else in the state budget. Highway 1. Now, I realize this year has been difficult for everyone because of all the weather that we've been beaten up with, and hopefully we've now paid for all of our sins. Sidewalks. Some sidewalks have to be torn up and new concrete poured. Others, and this comes from someone who's on a sidewalk a lot, here's a company called Concrete Solutions, where they lift up the concrete pad, clean out the roots and whatnot that are underneath, and then put the pad back down. It would be an idea to ask this firm to come in and do a pilot project and see, is it as good as they claim here in their advertisement? This came from one of the mailers that you get in your mailbox at home. Some obviously have to be torn up. But if this is a less expensive way of keeping our sidewalks nice and flat, again, you avoid trip hazards, you avoid lawsuits because someone tripped on a sidewalk, whether it's a little kid or an older person trying to keep themselves active in their later years. This is spending money to save money in the long run. On our streets, this was from last February 24th edition of the newspaper of record, which is the Buffalo News. Amherst official urges the use of brine with road salt. Their deputy commissioner claims that by taking this approach, 30% less salt during a winter season could be used with an overall cost savings of 7%. This is how it works. As salt is dispensed, it's misted with a solution of 70 or 80% salt brine. The rest is a mixture of an organic substance such as molasses or beet juice with magnesium chloride, which inhibits corrosion, which, as we all know, damages the underbelly of everybody's car and trucks. It might be an idea to give this a try, and as this gentleman, their Deputy Highway Superintendent Paul Anderson, states in this article, most towns in western New York have adopted this in some form or another. If there's a cost savings and it can make driving on our streets in the wintertime safer at a lesser expense, let's give it a try and see if it works here. It could save you money, and again, it makes things safe, so if there's an accident, less of a risk of somebody reaching out to the heavy hitters or the bald guy and the other guy who are in the midst of a professional divorce. Highway 3. I knew this was going to get out of order. I was hoping this evening, and the supervisor mentioned earlier that from a cost standpoint, it's nice to see that we're finally moving away from this absolute thing. We have to buy new. We can't buy anything else. So I'm glad that we're moving away from that. I was hoping this evening to be able to tell you about a 40-yard Prentice loader that was available at a company called RDK in Tampa, Florida. Unfortunately, it got sold. But given all the work that our crews have done this year, and they've done a very good job in clearing all of the tree debris that in the nicer weather and in the not so nice weather earlier in the year, you're currently running 3 20-yard trucks. By moving to a 40-yard truck such as this, you can now pick up 80 yards with 2 trucks instead of 60 yards with 3 trucks. That's an automatic productivity improvement. You save on fuel, you save on labor, you save on insurance.
Jeff, I don't mean to interrupt, but Commissioner Kiley, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't we budget for a 40-yard loader?
That is correct, sir.
Okay, so
Oh, all right, then we're moving in the right direction.
serendipity right there.
Fine, thank you. Above and beyond that, besides buying used trucks as you've done at auction recently, still want to propose this idea of using retired military vehicles that can be turned over. This, as I showed you last year, was done in the town of Cortland, New York, and as their superintendent stated, if we had bought new, it would have cost about $150,000. They got the truck for $20,000. We had some expense in retrofitting it, but we still saved $100,000. Not an insignificant amount of money. And it might be worth trying one of these to see. Can we achieve the same kind of savings here as they have in the town of Heartland, not Cortland? Where even more savings can be incurred is by getting out of the water business. Along with the cemetery business, those 2 things alone provide some serious room in the town budget. Even though it's the exact same water from Monroe County Water, there may have been a time when the Seabreeze Water District made some sense. I will argue that that time has come and gone. Obviously, the most prudent way and probably the quickest way would be to do a deal with Monroe County Water to do with what's known as a tuck-in acquisition. If that doesn't pan out, there are 3 publicly held firms who might be interested in getting involved with this. American Water, Aqua America, and American States Water Company. Either way, I think the time has long passed for us to be in the water business. That would provide, just on a cost savings alone, of about well over $900,000. That frees up a lot of space for other things.
Well, just to correct, really from the town's operational point of view, we're more of a pass-through for the Seabreeze, so that's really the ratepayers. The budget of Seabreeze really is a reflection of the direct relation and the services they provide to the ratepayers. So it would almost be like if you would take off Seabreeze off of our books, it wouldn't really have an impact on the town's budget. Maybe a slight administrative. We do some administrative work for Seabreeze in their collection, but the overall Seabreeze budget appears on our town budget, but really doesn't reflect it. It really isn't in its core a part of the town budget.
But there still is, according to the revenue line, what is known as unmetered, formerly known as uncollected, which going into your 18 budget amounts to $31,000. Not an insignificant amount. Just that alone needs to be addressed. And where would a budget presentation be without leaves, which is how this all began a long time ago? On 2 points, I bring this up. Number one, as you're planning for your new DPW facility, a give-back area so that everything is in one place and everything hits the ground once would certainly be in order. You could have 3 concrete bunkers, just as it used to be out behind this building when commodity recycling began in 1970. 1 for gravel, 1 for compost, and 1 for and 1 for brush. That has been mulched up. When I was prepping up for this in the clerk's office several weeks ago, someone called and asked if there was any more material available. No, there wasn't, because we ran out. And this is not only in the fall, but in the spring as well, when that material is not being collected separately. In fact, it's worth noting from Section 192 of the code, under 192.23b, all leaves must be in containers. Leaves must not be mixed with other refuse materials set out for collection. And that goes back to 1995. On a night like this, and especially this kind of year when we've been hit with so much rain, anybody who earlier in the day perhaps got outside and raked their leaves to the curb because their hauler is taking them in bulk, with the mess that's going to happen over the next 36 hours, you wind up with unsafe streets. Other towns do this, and how they get away with it is beyond me. It also states under prohibited acts in 19229, loose leaves on private property and or the right-of-way adjacent to private property shall not be raked into the roadway or stored loose along the road edge for collection. All leaves must be containerized for collection in accordance with what I just read a few moments ago. If the haulers are looking for relief on this, then the town needs to engage them to find out how can we resolve this so this material can be collected properly, kept out of the landfills and used for compost or what have you, as opposed to, again, winding up with slick streets. You have to try those teeth on before you buy them. It's also worth noting, in the town of Brighton, where they do not use their packers to collect leaves, wrongly in my opinion, perhaps in the spring we could try a little pilot program. There used to be an equipment sharing regimen with Brighton. We used to have a tub grinder. They got lent our truck grinder, and we got lent access to their facility. Well, if they're not going to use their packers, maybe and since we've had experience now, unfortunately, in using other towns' equipment, maybe they would be willing to send their packers over in the spring for spring cleanup, try it and see how it works, and we loan them something that they might need in exchange. And using on a swap-out deal doesn't incur the cost of additional equipment. If it gets to the point where there's a need, there's plenty of reconditioned equipment out there as far as packer trucks are concerned. In fact, I'm getting some information which I will share with the commissioner when it comes in, that could be had just like the dump trucks and other equipment that you've bought at auction. And that is my message.
Thank you as always, Mr. Goldblatt. It's always good to see you, and I know you do a lot of time preparing this, and it's nice to see some of the things you had here. We had already worked to incorporate, but certainly we always take your testimony and find value in it, so I appreciate it. Anyone else in the audience wish to address the board? Going once, going twice. I will now make a motion to close public hearing.
Moved.
And a second.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing is closed. This concludes our body of work for tonight's special meeting. We will have a town workshop on Tuesday, November 14th, here in the Broderick Meeting Room, 4 p.m. And the same day, November 14th at 6 p.m., I believe, we will have a special town board meeting to adopt our 2018 town budget. Any revisions to the budget will be itemized and presented to the board prior to that, and we will discuss them at the meeting. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
And a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The meeting is adjourned.
We hope you enjoyed this presentation of the Arundecoit Town Board on ICAT 12, Arundecoit's government access channel.